Hello and welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to start the Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy is a very diverse and vibrant subject, and to understand it as a whole, we have to have an open mind and to disregard all the preconceived notions which we have had of philosophy. First, starting off with the philosophy of Charvak. So the Charvaks have a very happening theory about materialism. So they are the ones who basically propounded materialism and were of the opinion to make merry and chill. So basically, these are the ones who would advise you to just live in the moment, just see whatever is going on, and to keep yourself happy at every moment. Yes, Netflix and chill, this kind of theory. Okay. Whenever we are reading philosophy, we have to be very sure about what the epistemological sense they propounded. The thing is, epistemology means what is the source of knowledge. For Charvak, they accepted only perception as the only praman or the only source of valid knowledge. Perception and praman has been described as pratyakshmev ekam pramanam. What they mean by this statement is that perception is the only valid source of knowledge. For Charvak, defines perception in terms of the sense-object contacts, the kind of things which you experience while having visual contact or olfactory, which is related to the smell, uh, and then the gustatory, tactual, and auditory kind. So the perception just revolves around the five sense organs which we have, and whatever we see or sense or are able to experience in matters of these five senses is the only thing which is valid, and this is the only valid source of true knowledge. So, according to Charvak, only perception provides reliable, definite, and non-erroneous knowledge of reality, and hence it is the only Praman. So, Charvak extends certain arguments in order to prove the futility of the other Pramans, like inference, verbal testimony, which are widely accepted by Indian philosophical systems. So, in order to grasp a hold about Charvak's epistemology, we also have to study about why did they deny the other sources of Praman. First of all, we would study the refutation of validity of inference by the Charvaks. So, what does inference actually mean? In inference, one proceeds from the perceived and known hetu to the unperceived and known sadhya. What he really means by this statement is that while we are trying to infer something or while we are trying to deduce what is this thing, we are actually trying to perceive the subject from unperceivable, right? So we're basically proceeding from the perceived thing. Like what I know of right now is that I could see a smoke at the hilltop. This is something which is perceivable. But what I am actually inferring is that uh, I could see a smoke, so maybe there's some fire underneath the hill, or maybe some fire nearby the hilltop. This is what is unperceivable. I haven't seen the fire by myself. I'm just deducing it. I'm just trying to prove it by my reason, by trying to utilize my thinking that there is something because of which the smoke is coming. So here the smoke is the perceivable object, just known as the hetu, and this fire is unperceivable, which is just in my mind. It is called sadhya. Validity of inference is dependent on its logical ground or vyapti. For this relation to be true, there has to be a universally accepted relation between fire and smoke. There has to be undoubted relation between smoke and fire. Like there's smoke only when there is fire. This has to be certainly true. And when we try to establish a condition between hetu and sadhya, between what is perceived and what is not, it is called vyapti. So, in order to provide the validity of inference, we actually need a logical ground, which is known as Vyapti. Vyapti is invariable, concomitant, unconditional, and universal relation between Hetu and Sadhya. So, for Hetu and Sadhya, Vyapti has to be always true. It is the universal relation, it is like paramount. So, in this condition, what I'm trying to infer as Vyapti is for me, I'm establishing a relation that whenever there is smoke, there is fire. So, here uh, we'll just read out the example. Here, the Vyapti is wherever there is smoke, Hetu, there is fire, Satya. The Praman is Pratyaksha. What I can see right now is that there is smoke at the hilltop. The hill is the Paksha. Whatever I can see, Praman, Prama or Anuman. Therefore, there is fire on the hill. So, what I'm trying to infer from this is, what I'm guessing is that since there is a fire, since there is a smoke I could see at the hilltop, there might be fire somewhere. This is what I am inferring. This is what I am trying to reason. Inferring the presence of unperceived fire on the hill by perceiving the smoke is possible only when Vyapti between smoke and fire is already known. This could be only possible only when I know this universal relation, only when I have the knowledge that smoke comes only whenever there's fire, only when I am aware that there exists a Vyapti. However, Charvak says that inference can be treated as praman only if one can establish Vyapti beyond doubt. So, just for a moment, think that is it possible that smoke can appear without the occurrence of fire? There are many instances, right? Modern science has made us believe and has also showcased different instances where smoke can come without eyes, without fire. Example, dry ice. The smoke. Liquid nitrogen also has some kind of smoke. There are also smokes from other things. The smokes which you see when the bride and the groom enters over the wedding ball, right? Many instances we have seen where there's smoke but there's no fire. However, this can't be established. This Vyapti can't be established as the undoubted situation. So, Charvak gives certain arguments as to why the Vyapti cannot be established. First of all, Vyapti cannot be established on the grounds of perception. He says that uh, Vyapti, if you try to create or if you try to establish Vyapti based on perception, it would lead to a fallacy of illicit generalization where one infers universal conclusions based on particular facts or experiences and limited perceptions. So, whatever we have seen or whatever we have experienced is basically limited, right? It's basically limited by our sense of objects, it's basically limited by our sense organs, and also through different experiences. Not everybody could experience everything in this vast universe. And trying to bring a Vyapti or trying to establish a universal condition based on our limited senses and perception is basically trying to create a generalization or basically trying to stereotype a norm, right? And in this will in turn create a fallacy of illicit generalization. The concomitance which we perceive between smoke and fire is limited in limited number of cases can never implicate that the case will be same everywhere all the time. So, for instance, if somebody sees a smoke and later, after a few minutes, he sees while crossing downhill, he sees that okay, there was a smoke because there was a fire going on. But is it true for every time? Will it be true for every time he sees smoke? He could say that there might be fire. No, there are many instances where there would have been smoke where fire was not there. So, trying to elucidate uh, perception, Vyapti on the basis of perception is like trying to create a general norm for universal things, which is totally invalid. Secondly, Charvak denies Vyapti on the basis of inference. If one claims to establish Vyapti through inference, it will result in a circular fallacy or a fallacy of petitio principii. So, what he means by this statement is that since inference is a praman, which itself is based on Vyapti, so we were trying to establish inference based on Vyapti, right? So earlier we have read that in inference one proceeds from what is perceived to the unperceived, and there has to be a logical ground for it in order to validate the inference. But now we're trying to prove the validity of Vyapti based on inference. It's like we're just going round and round in circles. For Vyapti, we prove. For inference, we proved, we used the proof of Vyapti, and for Vyapti, now we're using inference again. This is like a circular fallacy, and which is also called the fallacy of petitio principii. Since inference is a praman which itself is based on Vyapti, by making use of it to prove the validity of Vyapti is nothing but presuming the conclusion in the starting premises without any logical grounds. So if you use inference and Vyapti at the same time, if you use Vyapti to prove inference and inference to you prove Vyapti, it's like using conclusions at the start of the premise. You're just trying to use conclusion at the very start without any logical grounds. Also, if one claims to prove Vyapti based on different inferential ground. So first of all, we use an inference. First of all, we use a Vyapti to prove inference. So let's consider it as Vyapti 1. So I'm just trying to infer uh, based on this Vyapti, but also I have to provide the validity of Vyapti based on this inference. This will lead to a circular fallacy, which we have read earlier. But if I try to assume a different Vyapti, a different inferential to prove the Vyapti. First, I took this is my inference one, and I have used a Vyapti to prove this inference. And now to prove this Vyapti, I am using an inference two, which will lead to another Vyapti three, and this will go on for infinite. This will lead to a fallacy of infinite regress. So, if one claims to prove Vyapti based on different inferential ground, it will result in the fallacy of infinite regress. The next, he refuted inference based on verbal testimony. As we all know, Charvak denied the authority of Vedas in verse. What we could see is that in verbal testimony, one accepts the word from a reliable person or scripture as a source of valid knowledge without any scrutiny. We're just consuming whatever is given in the Vedas or whatever is given in the scriptures as something to be true, as something as undeniable and infallible. So we just don't scrutinize them. According to Charvak, this process is essentially based on inference. Since one cannot conclusively establish the eternal reliability of words of a human being or scripture based on limited number of perceptions. So we are actually limited by the number of perceptions, and we could not term something to be valid, something like the words of a human or the writings of a scripture to be valid based on our own limited numbers of experiences. Verbal testimony has all the logical inconsistencies associated with inference and hence cannot be qualified as a praman. Also, Chavak refutes the claim of infallibility of Vedas by the orthodox philosophical systems by citing the logical inconsistencies within different Vedas and Upanishads. So, for some people, they term Vedas as which are infallible, and the authority of the Vedas is paramount to them. However, Charvaks tried to refute the infallibility by saying that the writings in the scriptures as well as the words of human cannot be termed as the valid source of knowledge because we as humans are limited to our perceptions, and trying to prove the eternal reliability of these works, we're just trying to use our inference. We're just trying to claim that this is true beyond any scrutiny. So there, Charvak also found many logical inconsistencies in the Vedas. For example, how can Vedas accept animal sacrifice? That was an argument given by Charvaks. To believe that the verbal testimony is infallible in itself is a Vyapti, right? So for a Vyapti, I'm trying to establish a universal relation that something is true. This will be true at all times. What people try to infer by using the Vedas or other scriptures is that they're trying to prove that since it is written in the scriptures or since it is said by some humans of great authority, this is the uh, s- uh, perfectly valid statement, and this will be true at every time. So using a verbal testimony as the praman is actually trying to uh, augment this argument, and to believe that the verbal testimony is infallible is in itself a vyapti. Whatever is written in the Vedas is true. Hence, essentially based on inference. So we're just using an inference to try to reassert the authority of scriptural text. The next is causation. So Charvak denies the effect of causation. Inductive logic accepts causality, which supports the possibility of establishing unconditional and universal relation between two events, that is cause and effect. So in a cause and effect, we actually try to establish a relation between the cause and effect. We're trying to negotiate a relation because we're trying to generalize, or we're trying to reason that something happened because there was a cause of it. This is the effect because there was a pre-existing cause. Thus, cause and effect relation itself is a kind of vyapti, since it is based on the unconditional and universal relation between Hetu and Sadhya. So for Charvak, he defines the cause-effect relationship as something which is already a kind of vyapti, right? It's already a kind of a universal relation based on unconditional relation between Hetu and Sadhya. Charvak's arguments to establish the improvability of vyapti are very well applicable to causality as well. So, the denial of Vyapti by Charvak is totally applicable to the denial of causation, because it can be said that the cause and effect relation is an accidental conjunction of an antecedent and a consequent. So, that there are only two events, a precedent and an antecedent. It is because they have happened so many times and we have been so habituated to seeing them together that we kind of develop uh, a neuroplasticity, that these things occur together, and these have since A occurred, B will also occur. However, it is not essentially true. As the two events are found together in numerous occasions, the mind gets trained to believe that they always go together and concludes that cause effect relation is a necessary relation. So it is because of the functioning or because of the evolution of our mind that we have come into a conclusion that since A and B have been existing or have been seen together for a lot of times, we are habituated, or it's a psychological thinking that since A happened, B will also happen. This was also refuted by Western philosopher Hume, where he says that the causal necessity is not a logical necessity, but a psychological necessity. So, when we believe something to appear as a cause and effect of a thing, we actually are trying to perceive the psychological necessity of it. We are not trying to reason it based on our logic, that this is logically true. We're just trying to say that since we've seen it a million of times, since we've seen it numerous times, this will definitely exist. But is it essentially true? No, it's just a preconceived perception of our own mind. It's just our mind tricking us into believing that okay, this happened, so this will have also happen. It is just mental formations, mental constructs. So, however, there have been certain criticisms against Charvak for uh, differing Vyapti, for differing inference. The first one is, while accepting perception as a source of valid knowledge, Charvak makes use of the process of inference in which he violates his own epistemological position. So, as we have read earlier, Charvak says that Pratyaksh med ekam pramanam. So, when he's trying to validate, or when he's trying to reassert that perception is the only valid source of knowledge, he's actually thinking, he's actually using inference, and thereby violating his own epistemological position through limited number of perceptions. When Charva claims that perception can definitely give valid knowledge, he submits to the fallacy of illicit generalization. What he was trying to refer to as the condition for not accepting Vyapti, since perception would lead to illicit generalization, he is actually committing the same fallacy, because when he says that perception is the only valid source of knowledge, he is surrendering to inference, and he's surrendering to his only limited perception, and thereby committing the fallacy of illicit generalization. Moreover, accepting the possibility of a universal relation between valid knowledge, hetu, and perception, sadhya, is nothing but indirectly conceding the possibility of accepting vyapti, the ground of inference. So, Charvak was basically uh, caught in his own epistemological position, and although he accepted perception as the only valid source of knowledge, he was anyway conceding to the possibility of accepting a vyapti, because when he said, or when he termed perception as the only valid source, he was actually making a statement. He was actually making a universal relation between perception and the source of knowledge. So he was actually establishing a vyapti, and he basically denied vyapti in a previous incident. So it is just a fallacy over here. Second, Charvak's refutation of Anuman is in itself a Anuman. When Charvak is denying the validity of Anuman, he's actually denying the process. And whenever one thinks, he's actually denying the thinking. That is illogical, right? Charvak's refutation of Anuman is in itself a process of Anuman. So his refutation is basically derived from Anuman itself. This is major inconsistency in Charvak's deduction. Praman is the one that provides reliable and certain knowledge. Inference cannot provide reliable and certain knowledge. Therefore, inference is not a Praman. This is what he is using deductive methods. Charvak makes use of deductive methods to prove the utility of Vyapti as well as reaffirm his thesis that inference can never be qualified as Praman. So, this whole process, which is he is using to deny the reliability of Praman, he is actually using the process of Anuman. This is the process of Anuman, and it is a major inconsistency in Charvak's end. Perception can also go wrong in a case of illusions and hallucinations. For example, whenever you see a snake climbing a snake in a rope, this is a perception of a rope because it's just a rope which slide past your hand. It's not a snake, but you felt that it's a snake, right? You could see a fake snake and a plastic snake, for instance, and you would feel it's so vivid and so intricate with details that you would see that it's an actual snake, but it's not, right? Also, we perceive Earth as a flat, but it is round. We perceive Earth as static and Sun as dynamic. In these cases, errors created with perceptions are contradicted by inference. So these were all perceptual errors because these are we are actually limited by our sense organs. Our perception is limited by our sense organs, and whatever we have seen, like we see that the Earth is static and the sun rotates, but modern science has proved it to be wrong on many instances, and it's the sun which is static and the earth which revolves around it. These are the errors created by perception and are contradicted by inference. The next, according to Jains, is that if one asks Charvak to provide the basis for considering perception as the only praman, they will either maintain silence or say something. So, if they maintain silence, it means that they have confessed that they cannot provide a valid basis for their epistemology. And if they speak, it means they are trying to reason, they are thinking, and which is impossible without inference. So, in both the cases, they get caught in their own epistemological position. The next is if we don't accept inference as a praman, practical life would become difficult. Obviously, refusing to accept inference is nothing but refusal to think. All thoughts, discussions, affirmations, denials, and theories are all based on inference. Everything, our daily thoughts, everything is based on inference. And refusing to accept inference is like refusing to accept the way we think, refusing to accept logic, reason, everything. No knowledge cannot be transferred if only perception is valid. So there's no basically store of knowledge. Nobody knows what you said. Nobody, there's no storehouse. So, with this, we have come to an end of our first denial of inference. We'll study about Charvak's metaphysics in the next video. Till then, see ya. Bye.